Hello everybody and welcome to the latest in our Eurocham webinar series. So these Eurocham webinars are now aimed at producing content to support companies during these unique and challenging times. And the latest topic that we've got is crisis communications during COVID-19. I'd like to thank the Eurocham sponsors beforehand for making this happen. And just to introduce myself briefly, I'm the Business Services Manager at Eurocham Cambodia, but today the content will be coming from the dynamic duo Mango Tango, Nancy Jaff and Chris McCarthy. So I wonder, Chris, if you could just introduce yourself briefly.
Great, thanks, Tom. So Mango Tango is a technology and communication firm here in Cambodia, and we serve clients regionally and around the globe. I am the CEO, and Nancy here is the Chief Strategy Officer. Nancy has a background in communications. She was formerly head of research for Southeast Asia for Nielsen Media Research, and then previously in New York, you worked at some of the top advertising agencies in the world and in Singapore, as did I. Did I do okay intro there?
Yes, thank you, Chris. And we're excited to share with everyone some thoughts on this topic, which is certainly all of our clients have a real sense of urgency of how do you react now in today's difficult times.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for the introductions. Okay, so just to introduce today's agenda, it will follow the same format as all the others. So it will last between 45 minutes and 1 hour, including Q&A. We'll start with a very brief introduction of Eurocham activities during COVID-19 before launching into the crisis comms content. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation, but you can type in your presentations at any time, your questions, at any time in the chat box on the bottom right. So what we'll be doing is keeping note of those questions and then asking them to Chris and Nancy at the end of the presentation. Any questions that we don't get to, and yes, there will be a recording of the presentation. Any questions that we don't get to during the Q&A session itself will be answered in email, or if you comment on the YouTube link that we'll be sending out, we'll be getting responses to you there as well. So one other thing just to mention, if we do run into technical difficulties during this webinar, the protocol for Eurocham is that we will close the webinar, we will record the webinar, and we will send out the full webinar with Q&A to all participants who have registered to this. So hopefully that situation doesn't arise, but if it does, that's the protocol. Okay, so briefly to introduce Eurocham. Eurocham is the largest non-Cambodian business association in Cambodia at the moment. We've been supported by the European Union ICI Plus program since 2014. And really we aim to function as the bridge between European investors and stakeholders in the kingdom. So we do that via 4 activities. Members is the networking events, the breakfast talks that you'll be familiar with. We have outreach activities where we promote Cambodia as an investment destination. We have an advocacy department which works with the royal government in order to improve the ease of doing business for European businesses in the country. And finally, the services department, which I manage, which is aimed at providing advisory services for institutions and companies to enter or expand their activities in Cambodia. So Eurocham itself has been heavily impacted by COVID-19. Obviously, all of our events have been postponed until further notice. Most of our own staff are working remotely. We're doing our own form of crisis communications by disseminating COVID-19 communications validated by the WHO and the Ministry of Health. And also, we're still engaging with the government to discuss mitigating measures for impacted sectors, so in particular, tourism. You may have also seen in our newsletters, we're also gathering and summarizing all relevant decisions and announcements by the royal government, and you can find that on our website and our newsletter. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that if you're interested in the English translations of some of those recent announcements. And here is the link to the latest one. Okay, so with that, I'll now pass on to the content you came here for. So Chris and Nancy, the floor is yours.
Great, okay. Thanks very much, Tom. Thank you, Eurocham. So today we will take you through communication strategies for COVID-19, what to do now, and how to plan for the future. So I think we all know the world is facing some unprecedented challenges, both from the health crisis and the economic downturn that is the result of that crisis. So communicating effectively both internally within your company and to all of your stakeholders and externally has never been more critical than it is now. We're in a big transition, I think, for how people will work and how the world will work after we come out of this. And I'll talk a little bit about that more later, but typically a crisis like this tends to accelerate trends that have already been happening in society, in technology. And I think we'll start to see some of the trends toward remote work and distance working accelerating a little bit more as we go forward. But today we're going to talk about how to communicate right now and how to prepare for the future. And most importantly, I think, as we've heard this from a lot of our own customers, we're providing a framework for messaging, a framework for how to think about communicating, what message, when, and to whom. So communications, of course, as always, is a core part of any organization or business. It will help your company survive and even thrive if you're able to communicate effectively during this crisis. Brands that communicate effectively will rise in value. Research shows that brands that are able to survive traumatic events or crises while communicating effectively typically rise in value. Brands that don't communicate and do not reach out in a meaningful way will tend to lose consumer confidence. And another aspect of communication today is that brands must make faster decisions. I say brands, whether you're a nonprofit or a government organization, you have attributes, you have brand attributes that people think about you as. So any company must make faster decisions about what to communicate. Things are changing very quickly, sometimes day to day, and you have to be prepared to respond to changes in your audience and in your consumers. And of course, one of the most important things to start with is understanding the mindset of your users or your consumers or your audience.
Yes, so consumers today, as I'm sure you're all well aware, are feeling very anxious and fearful much of the time. It is a difficult time for most people here in Cambodia and of course globally as well. We at Mango Tango have been doing a lot of surveys of both our own staff as well as the general population to make sure that we understand how Cambodians are feeling and responding in this crisis. And what we're telling our clients is, right now, you need to think about communicating with compassion, with empathy. You need to build trust with your customers and with your employees. It's a difficult time, and people need to be informed, and they want to be reassured by you. So as Chris mentioned, we've been using a framework to help understand the different stages that people are going through in response to this pandemic. Now, this is the Kubler Ross Change Curve. It was originally developed as a way of thinking about how individuals respond to traumatic situations, such as the loss of a loved one. But we're finding it's very relevant for thinking about how both individuals and how we as a community are responding to this pandemic. So I want to talk a little bit about these stages, and then we'll go through examples of communications at each stage. So the first stage, and we saw a lot of this, was denial. Oh, how bad can it be? This is going to go away quickly. We'll be back to normal in no time. I hope you are not in denial still. We do know people who are still at this stage. And we also believe it's a stage that will come back as things start to improve. But for the most part, people moved on from that as there was lockdown, as schools were shut, as bars were closed. We did go into this second period where people felt very frustrated, they felt angry, they felt depressed, And they were scared, they were afraid, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen to me? What's gonna happen to everyone? So at this point, we do believe we're coming out of that, or many people are, and going into the more hopeful phase of experimentation. Okay, here we are, we have to learn to accept this is happening, we can't deny it anymore. So how do we deal with it? What do we do now? How do we change in this new situation? And finally, the hope is that this will lead to an evolution of behavior, an evolution of thinking, and of course, for our topic today, an evolution in the way you communicate with your customers as well as your own staff.
And just to underline what Nancy was saying, this framework, which has been in use for more than 50 years, has been applied originally to individuals suffering traumatic events, but it actually has been shown to also be an accurate representation of what groups or communities go through as well. And so as we go through this presentation and we talk about messaging and communicating, these are the phases that will serve as a lens through which to have those conversations. And I will add one more thing to this. It's important to understand which phase your audience or your users or your constituents are in, because if somebody is in denial and you communicate to them as if they were in an experimental hopeful phase further on, they're not going to react well to that, and vice versa. So it's important to get the message right for the stage that people or groups are in. And we'll start to go through that now, starting with the denial stage.
So the denial stage, which again, we hope everybody's worked through this, is very important for companies to communicate early and often. And we do have some good examples of that here in Cambodia. It's very important to be very sensitive about your messaging. And if you haven't already, really take a look at every communication you have out in the marketplace. If you have anything that shows images of groups of people together, take that down. It's not appropriate anymore. Don't be running that. The language you use, you have to be very sensitive. As we all know, most in-person events have been canceled, and now everybody's dealing with the question of, well, when can we go back and do in-person events again? We are finding in the US, which of course, as I'm sure you all know, has been very hard hit, the big companies are looking at summer 2021 before they're even thinking that the world will be ready for in-person events.
Yeah, we actually have, we work with some people at Dell, at Google, and at Microsoft in the United States, and we learned that those organizations, Google, Dell, and Microsoft, and I'm sure others, but we know those ones particularly, have canceled all in-person events through next spring. So through spring of 2020. So that brings us to the summer. And perhaps spring of 2021, sorry. So perhaps they're being cautious, but that is the reality.
So another thing to evaluate right away is the voice of your communications. The kind of marketing and advertising voice that you have been using may not be appropriate right now. People want to hear an authentic voice, a genuine voice. They want something that seems more human, and we'll share some examples of that. But it's very important that you build trust, that people feel that you're speaking honestly. People need reassurance. Your customers need reassurance. Your employees need reassurance that the company is there for them. So this is an important aspect to be considering. And what we did find early on and what we recommended to our own clients was to provide information to increase understanding of the virus and implications for behavior, educational videos. And those have proved to be very popular with Cambodians. It's very important that you acknowledge the pandemic. I mean, we've had a number of conversations with clients who say, well, everybody's talking about it. But if you're not talking about it, you're seen as kind of missing the big picture. You have to address it. And another thing you have to think about is every company is now in the business of promoting public health. Certainly, we never thought of ourselves in that business, but now every company has to be thinking about that. You have to be thinking about your employees. Can they be working from home? What are the options to keep them safe? Providing masks and hand sanitizer always is a helpful gesture. Amplifying the WHO recommendations on social distancing and hand washing, very important. So consider implications for your messaging. How do you make sure that you are promoting public health?
I will say we actually had a number of our clients come to us, including some large consumer package companies, and check in and ask, one of the comments we heard was, well, everyone else is messaging about this. Should we message about this? Should we acknowledge it? I mean, there's already a lot of people talking about it. And the answer is yes, everyone needs to. It's not a trend, it's not a fad, it's the new reality, and people are looking to you and your organization or company to understand how you fit in. And if you're not communicating about that, you are communicating. You're communicating that it doesn't matter to you.
So just to show some examples of companies who were effective early on, a number of Cambodian companies did come out right away with educational messaging. We're lucky in Cambodia that Facebook is so popular, and it's so popular for a channel for brands and companies to communicate. And we did see a lot of great communications. We did some educational videos for some of our clients, which I won't share today, but we were very proud of the work and got a lot of very positive feedback. People in Cambodia were definitely hungry for this information. So now we move on to the very challenging, the frustration and depression stage. This pandemic really is testing our humanity and our values. And again, it is so important as a company to think about how are you helping? How can you provide emotional support in your messaging? This messaging must continue to be sensitive, it must continue to be reassuring, and in a way, it's very easy to reach your target audience right now because they are all at home. Online use has gone way up globally and here in Cambodia, as has TV watching. Some people ask us, is TV still relevant? It absolutely is.
More than ever.
And we're lucky in Cambodia because media buying is actually quite affordable here. So don't overlook TV when you're thinking about how to reach out to your market. You do need to start planning for webinars such as this one and other kinds of virtual events, virtual happy hours, virtual parties, virtual fundraising events. These are all what you have to be looking at now. And we do believe it's very valuable to continue to provide information about the virus and what you are doing. What are you doing to help? So continue those educational videos. And just in general, it's very valuable to show how you are connecting with the community, to show people that you are treating them with kindness, that you care. This is a message that really resonates in this, especially as people are anxious and depressed. So as I mentioned, we've been doing quite a bit of survey work over the last few months. So here are some comments we got early on, when I would say these are in the fear and depression stage. People said directly, I'm so afraid for this pandemic. I feel so sad for my country and for the world. And the missing, I miss what used to be. I miss my workplace. I miss my football team. And I hope everything will be back to normal soon. So that wish has not come true, but that's how people were feeling. An example of a company, a global giant that took action very quickly and very effectively, I think, is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, of course, is always spending a lot of money on advertising. Here in Cambodia, they had planned a big campaign. They had shot a commercial for Khmer New Year with 300 extras. It was on the riverside. It was fabulous. They didn't run it because it was no longer appropriate. Instead, they ran ads explaining that they were spending that money, giving it to communities to help fight COVID-19. Very much appreciated.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Actually, apart from Coca-Cola, a number of companies in Cambodia have switched their messaging, and we'll look at some more of those as well.
Eurochem itself has had to certainly had to do that.
Yeah. Just one more thing I wanted to mention on Coca-Cola. They very quickly organized a huge global event with lots of celebrities. I don't know if it had impact here, back in the US. It seemed like everybody watched that thing. So it was a very impressive feat that they got so many celebrities lined up so quickly and pretty early on in the pandemic when people needed something to make them feel happy.
And they were all from home, I think.
Yeah, everybody was home. So an example of a company that's been doing a very good job closer to home here in Cambodia is ABA Bank. Now ABA, of course, is the largest bank and by far the largest advertiser in the financial world here. And they very quickly realized that people were nervous. So they started advertising that your money was safe with them. Of course, the banks were worried that there would be a run on cash, and we have heard about cash hoarding. So they were very quick to reassure customers that wasn't going to be a problem. And also that you could come to the bank. They talked about the staff taking precautions. They showed staff members with masks on. Very clear, very quickly that they were a safe place to continue to do your banking. Another thing they did was sponsor a fundraising event. So they launched a fundraising event for support for COVID-19 healthcare. They matched donations from the public. And even though, honestly, this didn't cost them a lot of money, it got them a lot of goodwill. I know a lot of our own team were very impressed with this. And they had a series of communications about it. And of course, were able to then donate supplies to the Soviet hospital, which were much appreciated. So this brings us up to the experimental or decision stage. And we believe this is where we are now. So people are starting to learn to live under the new restrictions. They're starting to engage in new ways. And now you as a company, you as a brand, need to think about how do you offer new solutions for today's world. You should be communicating more digitally. Whatever you're doing digitally, you should be doing more because that's how you can reach people. And then you have to think about how can you help? How can your company be more relevant? How do you offer new ways to connect? And how can you bring a sense of the new normal to whatever it is that your company is engaged in now? And let's start with your employees. Now, I mean, we know many companies are in a tough situation. People have to lay people off. They have to ask for cuts in salary. But it's very important that you continue to communicate to your employees that you care about their safety, about their health. We surveyed our employees actually just last week about the possibility of reopening our office because we've all been working from home for a couple of months now. And based on their feedback, we are planning a limited reopening, but we will not be back full time soon. We did hear a lot of anxiety still.
You know, that actually was an interesting point. We had been hearing, so our staff, we have, I think 50-something people working from their homes. We managed to relocate everyone to home work about 7 or 8 weeks ago. And it was a bit of an adjustment because I think it's certainly in Cambodia, if you have an office job, you're not typically used to working remotely. But that went pretty well. However, we were starting to hear more recently people are a little anxious to get back, to see their friends, to be in a group situation. However, when we ran a survey again last week among the staff, we heard that while they do want to go back, we asked specific questions about what would be necessary for that to happen, and they were very clear that the answers were like, well, when there's a vaccine or when there's a better treatment or, if we are assured of safety. So while they expressed wanting to go back, when you get into the details, they're actually very concerned about it. So some of the things they said was just making sure that management was providing social distancing, hand washing, masks, and other safety, and just concerned in general that while things are looking good now, especially in Cambodia, they do worry about the future. So actually, we were a little surprised at the difference between people's positive attitudes, like, yes, we'd like to, but then when you actually get specific, there were some challenges there still.
So what do you do? Well, again, it's so important that you be continually communicating right now. You have to reassure your customers. If you're open, certainly let them know that, but let them know that you care about their health. Tell them what you are doing. Like the example of ABA showing staff with a mask on actually is reassuring to people. They do feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah, and tell them what your business is doing and what your plans are, and how you're thinking of when you might be going more back to normal, or what the business strategy is going forward. Again, going back to what Nancy was saying at the beginning, the more authentically and you can communicate, and the more open you are about the future, that helps reassure your audience and your customers.
This also, interestingly, is a time to think about finding new customers. I know a lot of people are feeling business is down, times are difficult, but it actually is the right time to start thinking about how to build brand share, because customers are changing their behavior in so many ways right now. I'm very in touch with changes in packaged goods sales globally, and it's quite remarkable. We're not used to seeing these kind of great swings in behavior. We're finding that some old and trusted brands are reappearing as being very valued, and also new products. People are trying new products and then telling us that in the future they may stick with those new products. So there actually is a lot of behavior change going on right now. And so it is important for every company, every brand to think about how can you take advantage of this crisis? How can you take advantage of changing consumer behavior and changing consumer needs?
And that, I think, also is something that companies will need to monitor very carefully, because the situation is changing very quickly every day, and consumer behavior and choices are changing as well, as Nancy was saying. And I think I'll talk a little bit later about how, in fact, I think what we're seeing is the acceleration of some trends that were already in place. Trends towards sustainability, trends toward less consumerism, trends toward a stakeholder economy with businesses, not just focusing on shareholders, but focusing on everyone. And then, of course, the biggest trend of the past 20 years is a move toward remote working. So, those are, again, some of the drivers that are changing consumer behavior, and companies that can be aware of those and incorporate those into their strategy probably will find themselves in a good position in the future.
So we are seeing some examples, again, here in Cambodia, companies that are rising to the occasion, taking advantage of the challenges to try to bring in new customers.
For example, the Wing has offered free wing-to-wing transfers during the crisis to help win new customers. And our Reyes hotels have offered a special staycation package, and you're trying to get people in Cambodia more familiar with them. And again, it's just a way to win new customers through a different kind of marketing that wasn't needed before. But we are seeing, and not just these two examples, but plenty of companies who are thinking about free or discounted services. Well, Zoom, which we're not using, but Zoom, for instance, is a great example of that. They had a 40-minute time limit on their free version, which they removed for part of the crisis. So these are examples of how they're using free services or discounts to win new customers.
Another company that's doing a lot of things right is Decathlon. I'm sure all the Europeans who are listening are familiar with Decathlon. It's a huge brand from France. And they, I guess a couple of years ago now, opened a very large shop in the second Mall in Swansea. And they've been doing a great job of messaging both about safe shopping within their shop, with offering their delivery services and giving tips for working out from home. So very quickly, they described how they're protecting their customers with social distancing. The fact that they have such a large store, I'm sure, helps with social distancing. And they also offered a series of tips on the kinds of exercise you could do now that you're stuck at home. And hopefully, you can order the equipment and have it delivered to your home from Decathlon. So very good approach to supporting customers during this difficult time. And hopefully for them, expanding the people who shop with Decathlon.
And that's a great example of the help that the advice that they're offering really fitting in closely with who they are and what their brand is. For instance, the focus on exercises, workouts you can do at home. But yeah, they did a very good job of responding quickly.
On the less healthful side, Carl's Jr. has been doing a great job of promoting new habits that are, of course, very relevant now. They've been promoting their delivery and drive-through and showing how much fun you can have with a drive-through, Carl Jr.'s burger experience. One thing we have seen in Cambodia and really everywhere globally is people wanting snack foods, comfort foods, things they enjoy eating, maybe a little less emphasis on healthy eating. So anybody with a snack food or a little treat, now is the time to promote that.
That is interesting, that statistic. Mini mart sales globally are up significantly, and it has a lot to do with just snack foods and quick treats that people are having. And this, I see that for Carl's Jr., it's not so much it's not a drive-through, it's also a moto through. You just ride your moto right through there.
Definitely adapting to local markets. Another thing that's way up globally is drinking alcohol, certainly drinking alcohol at home. And we have seen some examples of liquor brands who are promoting that and promoting it for how we live now. So you see with Cambodia beer, a local beer obviously, they're showing a Zoom happy hour and somebody sitting at home on their laptop with their Cambodia beer and with their friends. Captain Morgan, which is a big global brand, has launched quite a large campaign convincing people that their virtual happy hours should really be fueled by Captain Morgan.
Not that we necessarily promote that, but good examples of companies that have used this opportunity.
They've risen to the occasion.
Or as we always, as we say for our liquor clients, of whom we have some, drink responsibly. But I guess if you're at home in your virtual happy hour, there's not much you can do.
No more drinking and driving, which is a good thing.
There's a benefit. Okay, so there are some examples of companies communicating during the different phases of the framework we presented, communicating different messages to different audiences about what they're doing, about how they care about the health and safety of their employees and customers. And so we'd like to transition now to talking about planning for the future. So I think, as Nancy was saying at the very beginning, as we go through these stages of grief in the Kubler Ross scale, from denial to frustration to acceptance and experimentation and reintegration, it does appear that we will probably be going through those phases again. Or rather, another way to put it is, it's not a linear progression. People can slip back, they can go forward, they can move to different places in that curve. And so, obviously, we're not doctors or epidemiologists, and we can't really see the future. But it does seem like we are in this new normal for a while, and possibly it will change how we behave in permanent ways as well. We do believe that, as many pundits do, life is not going to go back to the way it was before. And we are already seeing those changes here in Cambodia. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation about when it's safe to go back to work and when it's safe to open up economies. We'll see what happens, but it does seem like that this is it's a new environment. So what this means is all of the information that we gave to you earlier about the framework for communicating in the different stages, I think that's going to be with us for a while. And as I said, we're already starting to see these changes in Cambodia. Cambodia, even in Cambodia itself, COVID-19 is changing society in fundamental ways. People are living more of their lives online. Again, as I said, it's accelerating some trends that were already happening. One survey result we got from one of our employees was that when they felt that when they canceled Khmer New Year and most people could not go home, parents were forced to learn how to use the internet and learn how to use FaceTime and video messaging in order to communicate and contact their children and their families. So obviously this is something that was happening slowly a little bit, but again, this is an example of how this crisis has accelerated. How certainly my own mother has learned how to manage her microphone and camera in a much more efficient way than she ever did before. So I think this is something that
I know I managed to convince my grandmother to finally download WhatsApp the other day as well. So certainly I can.
Right. No, it's a perfect example of how there were certainly early adopters and people who were doing the video conferencing, but now it's definitely reaching out to a much broader part of the population. So I think we'll see more of that.
Yeah, we're absolutely seeing this globally and locally. And as one comment I got in Cambodia, even people over 50 years old are now using the internet.
And further to that same point, it's accelerating other trends that were already in progress: digital payments, e-commerce, and deliveries, especially in Cambodia. We actually Mega Pengo wrote one of the early reports on e-commerce a few years ago in Cambodia, and adoption was beginning, but it was slow. And again, this is one of those moments, this crisis, where we're really starting to see a fast acceleration of e-commerce, of digital delivery, digital payments, and delivery.
Now, one change that we are seeing globally that we don't know how much it will impact Cambodia is remote working. In the US, a lot of people are very comfortable working remotely, and we're even hearing very large companies like, again, Dell, Google, Microsoft, thinking of downsizing their office space and just having more people working remotely more of the time. We don't know if we will see this here in Cambodia. We know our own company, we've been very successful in getting everybody successfully working from home, but we are seeing much less of that. There's much more concern that people won't be as productive at home. Of course, the internet is not as good here as it could be, and that also slows people down.
Yeah, it depends on your router. Upgrade those routers. I think it depends on where you are, but that is true. Actually, one other comment about remote working, again, in a global context. You may have read in the news that both Dell and Google have canceled big skyscraper building leases that they had, paying big penalties, and just abandoning large office tower real estate that they had been planning to expand into. And part of that is because they believe that this is a fundamental shift in how people are working. Again, a trend that has been happening for 20 years, 10 years. Maybe we didn't have the fast enough bandwidth 10 years ago or 5 years ago, but it is definitely now happening. And if you see the actions of some of these big companies canceling building leases, it just sort of underlines that this is a sort of a fundamental transformation. And then just one more comment to put that in a big historical context. People have only been going to offices for about 150 years. Before that, well, first of all, there were really no large corporations. But the primary reason, starting in the 1880s, that people started coming to centralized offices was so they could communicate more effectively. And so maybe now we're seeing a shift away from that. But definitely something that will be continuing. Consumers are also, one other point about future communication. consumers are beginning to expect more from companies. They expect companies to be focused on doing what is right to support the community. They expect more corporate social responsibility. They expect corporations to express their purpose and how they help the community. And again, this is a trend that has been accelerating for a while. Back in the 1980s, there was a shift away from corporations looking at their broad perspective market and focused on shareholder value to the exclusion of all other stakeholders, employees, community, others. In recent years, we've been seeing a shift away from that. And again, this is the kind of crisis where McKinsey just put out a thought piece that if your company is not focused on purpose, is not focused on its shareholders, then you're going to be left behind. So purpose and values are so much more important now for companies to express.
And we've had many conversations over the years about whether it's as important in Asia generally and Cambodia specifically as we've seen emerge in Europe and North America. And it's definitely true that the concern for CSR has been lagging here and awareness of it has been lagging. But again, we do believe that this is shifting. We heard a lot of positive comments about ABA Bank and their raising donations, which again was a pretty small initiative, but really did have a lot of powerful impact and gave people a very positive feeling about the bank. So we do urge you, if you don't have a clearly defined CSR program, or if you feel you're not communicating it effectively, that is something to take a look at now.
What else will change in Cambodia? Our predictions. More hand washing. Actually, we have heard in our staff survey that people were surprised at how much more hand washing and attention to cleanliness there is more recently. More time spent online. Of course, that's happening globally, but it's happening in Cambodia. And because it's Cambodia, it's even more time spent on Facebook. We're seeing increase in digital payments, contactless payments and deliveries, more emphasis on education, including online classes, not necessarily from Cambodian schools and universities. I'm not sure about that, but people are logging into Coursera and Udemy and online training facilities from Cambodia in greater numbers. We've also heard people being a lot more cautious about investment and thinking about the future, possibly less interest in starting your own business, just out of a fear of the coming financial challenges that are on the horizon, and perhaps a reluctance to take on more debt, just because of the uncertainty of the environment. And so, to summarize what to do now, sort of wrapping up everything we were talking to in a few bullet points. Start planning now for updated messaging. Start planning now for how you communicate now and in the future, and stay engaged. It's a day-to-day, week-to-week thing, and you need to make decisions quickly about how to communicate. Do not go silent. Silence indicates that you don't care. It's not enough not to communicate. You have to put your message out and talk about what you're doing. And again, continue to respond to changes. We're only at the beginning of this thing. Hopefully economies will open up quickly. There's some indication that there may be waves where we will need to shelter in place again. So there might be ups and downs, but you need to be able to respond to those changes quickly. And celebrate the new normal. I say celebrate. We debated about this word. It is what it is. This is sort of the end of the Kubler Ross phase, where you integrate into the new normal, and that is what we're going to have to do. Go digital, of course, and plan online events and webinars. More communications, more online events, more virtual events are the place to go. And finally, stay connected. Show how you are part of the community. Show that you care. Show that you care about your customers and employees. Find new ways to connect with your staff. Find new ways to connect with customers. And enhance your corporate social responsibility initiatives and how you communicate what you are doing during these times. And then finally, a short pitch for Mango Tango. If you need any help with your communication strategy, please do get in touch with us. We're at mangotango.asia, or you can send an email to me, Chris@mangotango.asia. So I'll turn it back over to Tom, and we'll go into the Q&A session.
Well, Chris and Nancy, thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to come here today and talk. So, as before, it's very okay to have a short plug of Mango Tango, and I would encourage anybody who is interested in this topic to approach Mango Tango if this is something they're interested in. So then to go now into the Q&A. We had one question in the chat box, so now for everybody online as well, now will be the time. If you have had a question, please type it in the chat box, but just to start with the one that we have already. The first question we had was quite a difficult one to answer. If you have a COVID-19 case in your building or premises, what would the advice be to respond to that effectively? And I would just say beforehand, first of all, you should inform the Ministry of Health. That would be the thing that you should do beforehand. But into more general advice for Chris and Nancy, what would your advice be to companies?
That was going to be my question. Which office? No, that's a good. If somebody does test positive, of course, you should inform the relevant health authorities.
We actually had a client in Malaysia. Of course, probably many of you know Malaysia did have a big outbreak early on, and they really went into lockdown mode. But anyway, this particular client, there was a case in the office. They closed the office immediately. They locked everybody out of the office, which people were upset about, but I think also reassured. Nobody really wanted to be in that office. And they did clean up the office and let people go back in, but it pretty much led to people working from home. I mean, again, just with our own staff, we do find people are pretty anxious. They're worried about the virus coming in through air conditioning vents. And I think you have to tell your employees you don't want them to find out from someone else that they're a health risk.
That goes back to what you were saying at the beginning about being, clear, transparent, and authentic. Like, telling people the truth, telling them as soon as you know. That's what we've seen from other organizations who have found cases in their buildings. But yeah, that Malaysian case was, we actually had a conference call scheduled in the morning, and they called up and said, "Oh, they've locked our building." It was a very quick response, and then they communicated clearly with the staff.
But of course, the reality is your staff are not going to be understanding and happy to just go back into the office after that. So you do have to deal with the consequence.
Okay. I can actually weigh in on my own experience of this because I had a case of COVID-19 in my building myself, and I really appreciated from the building owners. Their process was to send out letters to all tenants in the buildings, letting them know there had been a COVID-19 case, letting us know that they had informed the Ministry of Health, and then very quickly everyone in the building was tested. So that was quite a reassuring response that I saw myself. So I guess following on from that question and from something you said, Nancy, one of the questions we've just had now is, what were the questions that you asked? It seems like you had a very good approach to your own employees in asking them if they were ready to come back to the office. So the question we have from the audience is, what kind of questions did you ask? And for other companies who might want to emulate that, how can they do that?
Well, first of all, if somebody wants to get in touch with us, we'd be happy to share more details. But we did ask a number of questions. Some were multiple choice, like what would it take for you to be comfortable coming back to the office? Some were more about their preferences. There was a lot of room for people to give comments, which people did. And frankly, we've also been checking up on a regular basis to find out if anybody's had any symptoms, if anybody in their families had any symptoms, and keeping track of any movement if they've traveled or family has traveled. So it was both very broad and open-ended, but also quite specific.
Yeah, I think we would be happy to share the survey questions with anybody if they're interested to learn them. Nancy actually is a social psychologist and expert survey designer, so we're lucky to have her skills in designing meaningful questions to get good answers. So we'd be happy to share that.
Okay. Although, to be honest, some of the questions were people found difficult to answer because are you willing to go back to the office is not really a yes or no question right now.
Well, that's true. We had to break that out into, what conditions would have to be in place for you to go back to the office, and then people could take multiple tick boxes. But that's where we were surprised at how many people actually really did want things to be either resolved or very safe before feeling comfortable.
So I have to say, we're right now doing a lot of in-person interviews, and we are doing them in our office in a very large conference room. But one of our staff asked if we could provide those large plexiglass masks that you see health workers, and we don't have a source for those.
Okay. So actually, I think, and somebody's question, I think, that builds on that is, obviously in Cambodia at the moment, I think there's been 122 cases. There's only one active case at the moment. The question from the audience is it too late to start these communication strategies? If a company hasn't been doing them already, is it still worthwhile to do them? I suppose my response would definitely be yes.
It's a definite yes. It's not too late. It's not too late at all.
But it might be too late to put out an ad saying wash your hands. that moment has passed.
The health tips moment has passed, but definitely it is not too late to communicate that you're aware and what your company is doing. Absolutely no. I would do that right away.
Yeah, and Cambodians, I'm actually somewhat surprised at how much anxiety there still is, given that we don't believe there's an outbreak here, that the numbers are very good. Cambodia's been very lucky so far. But Cambodians, many of them are still very anxious, and again, behaviors are still changing as a result.
I see one question that came in was, is this applicable, are these strategies and ideas, can you apply them for a business-to-business type relationship? And the answer is yes, absolutely, of course. I mean, it's for any kind of organization. Whether you're a school or a nonprofit or a government office, business-to-business or consumer, it's really the same basic principles apply.
Well, business to business is interesting because a lot of business to business is face-to-face. A lot of marketing is through events, a lot of sales is through personal meetings. So B2B marketing actually is struggling right now. How do you do online events? How does your sales force work more closely with marketing in these times when they can't just be out meeting and greeting and talking directly to potential customers? So yeah, B2B is its own challenge. We do a lot of work with B2B in US companies, so we're very aware that they're feeling very stressed how to do more with less.
Actually, that's a good point. One of our clients does a lot of B2B meetings and in-person sessions, and part of our work was promoting those and helping sign up people for the events. They have shifted all of those. Still doing the same number of events, perhaps more, but they've shifted all of that to virtual online webinars and meetings.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we've got 5 minutes left, so I guess please put your questions in now. But just while we're waiting, one question I would have is, a lot of the examples that you used in this deck were Coca-Cola, ABA Bank. These companies have very, very big budgets for marketing, so perhaps they're already used to digital content, digital marketing. As a digital marketing agency yourself, what advice would you give for those companies who are not familiar with this, who have never done this before, who have never organized a webinar before? How can an MSME take advantage of these global trends?
Well, it's a good question, and it's an urgent question. We're actually doing some work right now with union federations here in Cambodia who have not been communicating online with their members and now suddenly have an urgent need to do so. So we're identifying their requirements, and then we'll be doing a lot of work to help set them up with the right hardware and software and a lot of training to get them started.
But it is a good point. Some of the bigger companies obviously have big budgets and whole departments that they can turn to these issues of registering people and setting up webinars. But if you don't have such a big department, maybe there's somebody on your staff who knows how to do it. And of course, you could always come to us. We are happy to help with that whole process. I will actually, let me say one thing about, we did a lot of research on webinars and virtual events. It turns out, and there's some research and studies on this, it turns out that the actual technology piece is not the hardest part that companies report. The hardest part is doing the marketing, doing the online advertising and email campaigns, registering people, reminding people, and then bringing them to the event and then thanking them and following up afterwards. That component, which your team does a fantastic job of email marketing and management, that actually turns out to be, companies report that that's harder than actually running the actual technology for the end. But I don't want to discount how difficult it is to turn on your mic and camera. So that's, anyway, we'd be happy to give advice on that as well. No problem.
Perfect, yes, there's certainly a mixture of technical issues you have to learn and others. Okay, so actually I think that's 57 minutes and no further questions. So what I'll do actually, we can do is just put our presentation video on for a second so you can see, hopefully you should be able to see the presenters. Right. Okay, well, if that's not the case, then what I'll do. So as you see a technical challenge that we. Okay, thank you.
Here we are.
That was simple.
We are properly business.
So clearly there are some different technical things you still have to learn, as demonstrated there. But what I wanted to do is say thank you very much to Chris and Nancy for coming in today. Thank you very much, participants, for joining our webinar today. If you're interested, we'll be running more webinars in the future, so please have a look on our YouTube channel. You'll see webinars on stress management, you'll see other webinars on remote working, and what we'll do as well, we'll work with Chris and Nancy, so perhaps under the YouTube channel we can put a few of the example questions from your survey so that people who've seen this today can see the good practices that Mango Tango has been following. So with that, thank you very much to the audience, and we hope to see you at the next webinar. So goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.